what does atonement really mean in Hebrew? Did you know you can make atonement for inanimate objects in Hebrew? That's right. Leviticus 16:18 describes the Day of Atonement, where the high priest should make atonement for the altar before the tabernacle. Right after it says the priest should make atonement for the altar, a ritual is described where the priest takes some of the blood of a sacrifice and puts it on the horns of the altar. After this, he sprinkles some blood on the altar itself. And then, the text says, that the altar will be clean and will be purified from the uncleanness of Israel. Given that this ritual immediately follows God's command for the high priest to atone for the altar, it seems that the ritual is a description of how atonement is made. I'm tired of using scare quotes around atonement, so let me just explain what I think this Hebrew word actually means. I think it is best approximated by the English word cover, and not atone. In reality, the verb kiper in Hebrew does not mean cover, nor does it mean atone. It means kiper. Whatever English word we want to substitute for it will be an imperfect approximation of the word. This is not about kiper being special, but it is about words not having one-to-one correspondences in other languages. But why is cover a better approximation than atone? Simply put, examples like Leviticus 16:18 don't work for the English word atone. The action of the priest covering the altar with blood explains the act referred to by kiper. The English word cover works well for this, but the word atone requires an animate object in English, and it does not ordinarily mean to physically cover something. Other contexts also suggest this same meaning. In Numbers 17, 11, and 12, which is 16:47 through 48 in English, Moses tells Aaron to run out amidst the people carrying incense. He then says, "Vechaper alehem." Pretty much every English translation uses some form of the word atone in their translation in this verse. But if we used cover instead, what would happen? I would argue that this makes far more sense. Aaron brings the incense to create a physical barrier between the wrath of God that had broken out and the people themselves. In other words, Aaron covers them with the incense. Once they are covered, they're protected. The word atone also works in this context, since atonement has to do with something wrong being made right, and the wrath of God being among the people is definitely something wrong. However, cover arguably works better because it describes what Aaron is physically doing with the incense, and it certainly fits Leviticus 16:18 better. Whereas cover fits well for both contexts. The word atone only works for number 17, and cover still seems to be a more appropriate rendering. Now, you might be thinking, are there some contexts where atone works and cover does not? At first glance, a passage like Leviticus 4:26 would be one such context. It says, "Vechiper alav hakohen mechatato venislach lo." The priest will cover or atone for him for his sin, and he will be forgiven. This verse is the conclusion of a ritual performed with a sacrifice. After the priest performs all his ritual duties, we get this verse that tells us the result of the sacrifice. Since something is being made right, atone fits this context well. However, the phrase cover for also makes sense. The priest covers for the sinner with the sacrifice. This is a common colloquial expression in English. If someone owes a debt, I can cover the payment for him. The result is that he will be debt-free. And I suggest that this is exactly what is happening with the sacrificial system. Because of sin, some sort of reparation must be made. The priest sacrifices an animal in order to cover for the sinner so that he or she no longer needs to make the requisite reparation him or herself. So even in this meaning, cover works remarkably well. Let me say it again. This is not to suggest that the Hebrew word kippur means the same thing as the English word cover. Kippur means kippur. But if we are looking for an approximation in English, the word cover covers the term kippur remarkably well. The word atone only works in a limited number of contexts, and it is therefore sometimes misleading to translate kippur as atone, even though this is the word chosen most often by most English translations. So what does kippur mean in Hebrew? Well, if we're going to pick one English word, I suggest cover is the best word. What do you think?